check in with you guys. I know a lot of you have been following Kaylee and my story as I have stepped out and what I consider myself an urban missionary. So I work for Toronto Youth for Christ, or Youth for Christ Canada, but the Toronto chapter. And the program that I'm involved in is called The Shop, where we work with youth, both boys and girls, but predominantly guys between the ages of 14 and 25. And we work in a garage setting, and we just work on cars, work on small engines, we do some carpentry work, just things like that. And in the process, we life coach, mentor these guys, openly share the gospel with them, challenge them on life decisions that they're making, and help promote some good, healthy change. Our family has grown, like Todd said, since the last time we came. We welcomed Nolan into our family in late November. So it's been fun trying to now juggle 2 kids. You'd think it would be easier that there's 2 parents, 2 kids, but no, it doesn't work that way. 2 kids is more work. But we're settling into a routine, which is good. And it's been great. Mason is 4 years older than Nolan, so for us, we've found that a little bit of a blessing in the sense that Mason doesn't have the same kind of tantrums as some of our friends are that have kids that are closer in age. Mason is much more willing to tell us that he's upset, which sometimes can be colorful. What you guys were reading last week in Numbers, and I focused in on Numbers chapter 13. Just wanted to, something kind of jumped out at the page with me on there, and I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on that and just encourage you guys and challenge you guys. So I'm going to read chapter 13, and I'm going to start reading at verse 25, right to the end, and that's what I'm just going to focus on, and some of the ideas there. At the end of the 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. So they is, if you remember the story, is Moses sends some people out to go explore. Joshua's one of them, and Caleb's the other one, as well as 10 other guys. They go and explore the land, and they come back and with a report of this land that has been promised to them as well. So they came back to Moses, starting in verse 26. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. And there they reported to them the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is some of the fruit that we brought back. But the people who live there are powerful. Their cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in Negev, and the Hittites, Jebusites, and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of this land, for we certainly can do it." But the men who had gone up with them said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites lies and bad reports about the land they explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it, and the people we saw are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim, and we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." So here we have these 12 guys come back. They're giving the report on this land that God has promised. That promise is way back to the promise that God made with Abraham, right? This is the same covenant that's been going through, is that this land belongs to God's people. So God has promised them this land. And so these guys go out, they come back. There's a group of 10 of them, a very large voice that says, "We can't do this. They're too big. We're not strong enough. We can't do this." And then there's 2 guys that are saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. God said this is ours. God promised this to us. You know, you've brought us so far already. We need to go up and take what's rightfully ours, based on God's promise." These events still kind of occur with us today. all of us, we live our lives and we have issues. One struggles with, someone else struggles with something different, and it could be anything. And the world tells us, there's a very large voice that says you can't do it. You're not good enough. There's problems. There's giants in the way. It's not going to happen. But there's also a little voice, right? God's voice, maybe the Christian community, maybe some friends and family that really believe in us, saying, yeah, there's promises. God's promised this stuff. You can do it. God will provide. God will do these things. So far too often we're listening to man or woman, that voice that's telling us not to, society, and we're not listening and focusing in on what God's telling us. So I just wanted to challenge a little bit about what are some of those promises? What is it? What is God's promise in those areas? And then challenge which voice are you listening to? So what are some of the promises that we kind of struggle with? So one of them might be provision, right? We all worry about provision. Where is that coming from? Where's my, I have bills to pay, I have food on the table, I have diapers I need to get. Whatever your needs are, we worry about provision. So what does God tell us about provision? What is that promise? So a verse I pulled out is in Matthew 6:26, and I'll just read it quickly. It says, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, they do not reap, they do not store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they are?" That verse speaks to us around provision, right? The Bible clearly says that God's promise is that He will provide for our needs. I can tell you a million stories attest to that. As Kaylee and I, we are solely focused on our provision. In a roundabout way, we all are, but for me and Kaylee, it's much more upfront. And I can stand here and firmly say that God does provide. I can tell you lots of stories of that happening. So it's clear. The Bible says God will provide for our needs. Now, the voices will tell you, well, you need more, or you need this, or you need that. And we start getting messed up between our wants and our needs. And that's where that big voice is telling us those lies, right? And then we start believing them. So we just got to kind of sit back and say, what does the Bible tell us? Well, the Bible is clear and it says that God will provide for our needs. Maybe it's acceptance. Maybe that's something that we struggle with. Maybe that's where we worry. Maybe that's where we sit there and we look at it and we see the giants. And we wonder, where's God in all that? So what does God say about that? So here's something in Romans chapter 5, verse 8. "But God demonstrates His own love for us in this: while we are still sinners, Christ died for us." So the key part in that verse is, while we are still sinners, Christ died for us. So God, Jesus, He accepted you for who you are and died on the cross for you. We're about to celebrate that next week, and just think about that for a moment. It doesn't matter where you've been, what you've done, what you're going to do, is God accepts you who you are, where you are right now. As you sit in those seats, God is accepting you. He died on the cross for you. It doesn't matter. So again, the Bible is clear. The promise around acceptance is that God loved you so much that He provided salvation through Jesus Christ. He sent His Son to die. Maybe we're looking for a meaning in life, or a purpose, right? That's one of the questions that I used to wrestle with in high school with some of my friends, right? What's the meaning of life? There's got to be more to this life. There's got to be something. It's not just the daily grind of going to work and commuting and going to school, and there's got to be more to it. So what does the Bible tell us about that? So the verse I pulled out for that is Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Again, the Bible clearly says the promise is that God has a plan for you. You may not know it just yet. You may be still trying to figure that out, but it's clear, right? God promises that He has plans for you, plans to prosper and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. One more, maybe it's around fear of suffering, or maybe that's something you are suffering with something. Maybe it's an ailment, maybe it's family life, maybe someone's passed away and you're still struggling with that. Maybe there's some other stuff in your past that still you're working through and you're hurting over it. What does the Bible tell us about that? Well, In Matthew in chapter 5, there's the Beatitudes, right? That's where Jesus is teaching. He says, blessed is this, blessed is that, blessed is this. So the one in there I pulled out is, blessed those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Simple, short, sweet words from God, a promise to us that if we mourn and we're in mourning, we will be comforted. It's that simple. Far too often as we're locked in or listening to those, that larger voice, that group of 10, right, that are telling us we can't do it. And even if you read the Bible, that group of 10, they actually started spreading lies about the land, right? So not only were they saying they can't do it, they were making stuff up. They're getting the crowd going, right? They're saying we can't do it, we're getting the crowd going. And then there's that other small voice that's always there in the background. Not as loud, but it's always telling us and directing us back to God's promises. I just want to read something from this book. It's from Bruce Wilkinson. It's called The Dream Giver, Following Your God-Given Destiny. This was given to me by the director of Youth Unlimited when I graduated some of my schooling. I'm a bit of a dreamer, and in his little dedication he said to me in the front, he talked about that and wanted to give me a challenge on this. But I just wanted to read to you the chapter that's talking about facing giants, and it actually refers back to this. Of the 12 hand-picked spies that went into Canaan, do you really think they were 10 cowards? I don't. I think they looked at the walled cities, the highly trained armies, and the giants in the promised land, and they came back to Moses with a sensible report. The enemy is really strong. We seem weak by comparison. Therefore, we should not attack. But while their military assessment may have been well thought out, their faith is what failed them completely. Joshua and Caleb wanted to advance. The other 10 spies feared the giants more than they trusted God. Their arguments sent a nation spiraling into unbelief, and they turned back to the desert. It was a terrible defeat for Israel's dream. They wasted the next 40 years wandering around in the desert. Of course, when Israel returned 4 decades later, those same giants still were blocking their progress. But this time, Israel had rejected their fear and chose to trust God. Now they are ready to move forward under the direction of God, who promised, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. So where are you guys at in this whole idea? Who is it that you're listening to with your struggle? When you're looking at what God's promised and you're hearing that voice of doubt, who's winning that argument? Because I promise you, if you listen to that bigger voice, you're going to wander. You're going to wander until you realize that it's God and it's God's promises that are pure, sweet, and truth that we need to hold on to that will get us through. And when we do, you remember the rest of the story, right? Joshua goes to Jericho and they take the land. God will be faithful and pull through. Where are you at?